festival that aims to bring progressive South Asian and Iranian cinema to Central Texas. We just had our 10th anniversary of the festival this year, and we also do classes like this. Now I'm going to briefly introduce the class. So this is going to be a pretty laid-back, informal conversation that is going to delve into independent filmmaking, and it's moderated by Aliza. Aliza Khan is a filmmaker from India who's currently living in Austin, Texas. She worked at the award-winning production company Sikya Entertainment and was involved in projects like the Oscar-winning film Elephant Whisperers and in films like Hill and Acclaimed, both of which are award-winning films. Her directorial debut, Texas Janu, is in post-production right now and is being considered for various festivals. She is drawn to character-driven stories about misfits. And Aliza, let me know if I missed something.
No, it's great. Fantastic.
Alright, and I will bring you on to talk about Onir and maybe a little bit more about yourself.
Hi everyone, I am so excited to host this event. And one of the reasons why I was so excited when Indie asked me is because even though I've worked on sets as a producer and I've worked behind the scenes on the development end of making film and TV, I stepped into the role of a director for the first time over the past year. And that was an incredibly exciting but also nerve-wracking process. So I jumped at this opportunity when Indie asked me to do this because it's very rare that you get to pick the brain of as prolific a filmmaker as Onir. And his work has definitely inspired me. It has helped raise me in many ways. So I couldn't be more honored to be here. And I just wanted to add some more context for those of you who might not be familiar with this work, or those of you who are and just need a little bit of a refresh. So Onir is a filmmaker who's broken tremendous ground in Indian cinema. He predominantly tells queer stories, often love stories, with incredible depth and tenderness. He's also a filmmaker who has charted a path for himself and in the process created space for other filmmakers to also tell their own authentic stories. And he's done all of this by remaining fiercely independent. So I'm deeply honored today that we are able to talk to him, not just about his recent film, Highland that screened yesterday at AFS Cinema, thanks to Indie, but also about his previous works, and in the process learn more about directing and independent filmmaking as well. So before we begin, I would love to welcome Onir over here. So I think my first question for you is, how do your stories come to you?
Hi everyone, and thank you for having me here in the MIM and the college. So most of the films that I've done, the stories are inspired by real life stories. Via Fahim and Karun was inspired by a major who after he retired from the army, after he took a voluntary retirement from the army, he spoke about being gay, and in India, despite the Supreme Court having decriminalized homosexuality in 2018, the army still does not accept queer people in the army, so you cannot be open about yourself. So it kind of really, that story I thought it was important to tell because it challenges spaces of invisibility. And for me, what was interesting is wanting to set it in Kashmir, where you have a predominantly Muslim milieu, population, where also being gay or being queer is not easy, and also a space where most people choose to be invisible. So two persons who are not struggling to deal with their own identity, they accept their identities, but in a milieu where their identity is not accepted, you know. So that was the inspiration, and then you know, in India there is this law that if you have to show anyone from the army, then you have to get the script passed by the Ministry of Defense. And that's when I sent the script, the Ministry of Defense rejected the script and they refused to tell me why. And then 3 months later, it came up in the parliament, and they said that it is derogatory towards the army and it's a threat to the national security. And that's when I decided I have to make the film.
That's a really incredible and inspiring story about persevering even in the face of censorship. And my follow-up question to you is then, when you're faced with challenges like this, how do you keep going, and what is the support system that you've created around you as a filmmaker that allows you to navigate all of this?
I think when I made my first film, that was in 2005, a film called My Brother Nikhil, which happens to be the first film in mainstream Hindi cinema with a gay character as the main lead, and that was 2005. And somehow, I have been fortunate that before that 10 years when I was working in the film industry, I found a set of friends who were technicians, actors, who kind of believed in the stories that I wanted to tell and became the support system right from then till now, that constantly I feel you start with a tiny camp and slowly that camp starts increasing, and you have more and more people joining in with you because they believe that this story has to be told. And like I worked with a very, very small crew here, and everyone was multitasking because they felt that it's something they wanted realized and they wanted it to happen. At times, like in 2011, a film I did, this film is actually a sequel to that. It's a film called I Am, which is about identity. And at that point, again, I was facing the problem of not getting finance from the usual studios or platforms support. And what I did was put up a post on Facebook saying that I want to tell this story, and if you believe in this story, you can either send me money or volunteer. And it became one of the largest ever crowd-funded and crowdsourced film in India. And we had about 400 people from 47 countries sending me money so that the film could happen. So I feel that as an independent filmmaker, what pushes me, especially when I'm doing queer stories, is refusing to be invisible myself. So I've spent most of my life in a country where we were criminalized, and I used my art to voice my resistance to that invisibility, and that keeps you going, because if you don't accept that, that if you don't accept being treated as not equal, then you will find ways to tell those stories that challenge it. And I think it was, at that point it was, till 2018, it was about being criminalized and how you challenge that. And now we are still not equal, and how do you keep pushing the narrative through your work?
Absolutely, and I think what's so compelling about your work and your journey is that not only do you advocate for those with similar backgrounds to yours, but also how you layer different forms of marginalization. And I really admire also the cultural specificity that exists in each project. And from starting off with My Brother Nikhil, which was a very Goan milieu. And for those who are unfamiliar, Goa is a coastal state in India, which has its own ethnicity, its own language, its own distinct food and way of talking. And you captured it so beautifully through really a love story between a brother and a sister. And from there to, I Am was an anthology of short films. I think you pioneered a form, in a way, of bringing a short film anthology to the forefront. But each story was so distinct in the milieu that it was setting and the stories it was capturing. And now with, We Are Fahim and Karun, and of course other projects along the way. But with the Kashmiri context, you were so, just watching the film, I could tell that you were so rigorous in your approach to wanting it to be authentic. And I feel like some filmmakers, often say representation. I think it's a buzzword. People talk about representation, but I think you really go the extra mile with wanting it to be authentic. And I want to talk about what that process is like for you in terms of research. How do you go about doing that research to capture the milieu? How much, how long does it take? And when do you feel like you are ready to capture that space?
So I feel the need for authentic representation comes from the fact that, so very often all through my life I've watched a wrong representation of queer people in cinema. And wanting the correct representation of yourself also makes you conscious that you need to represent others as authentically as possible. So for example, in terms of VR and Karun, I've been going to Kashmir for 20 years. So it's not that I just go there and start shooting. In the location, I went there 8 times before I shot. I've been learning the language. I stay with the locals and not in hotels when I travel to Kashmir. And also what I try and do as a process of filmmaking is I have a script ready, and then when I decided, okay, these are my actors, so I start telling them to write the backstory of each of the characters about where the backstory before the film starts. And then from that, take in bits of stories and put it in the film so that they start owning the characters. And of course, in We Are Fahim and Karun, all the Kashmiri actors were played by Kashmiris. For me, that was very important, that it is authentic in terms of people. Similarly, I'll just tell you, like recently, I've just shot a short film, which is called His Fragrance. And it is about a blind masseur falls in love with one of his customers. And it was for the first time I was working, and I wanted to cast a blind actor and not someone who pretends to be blind. And of course, hunting for a blind actor who would be comfortable also playing a gay character is not easy. But I ultimately found someone. And I have not really interacted a lot with someone who is blind before, So for me, I was very worried that how do I get the essence. And then I started interacting with him. And again, while he was talking about his life, a lot of the dialogues of the film ultimately is just things that he told me about himself. Of course, I changed it and, tuned it to what the story of the film is. But a lot of it was what I learned from him about his life of living alone, coming from a small town and coming to Mumbai and being someone who is blind and is also working as an actor, lives alone. And then I convinced him that I want to shoot in your house because he is familiar with the surrounding, And then when I went for the first time to have a look at he lives in this tiny room which has a kitchen and a small bathroom. The kitchen is within the room itself. And my DOP, he said that this is just so tiny, where do we move? And I'm like, yeah, but that's what I want, that you feel that sense of, space, but it is his space and he's comfortable there. And then I noticed that he had so many musical instruments there, and I decided to bring in his music as a part of the narrative and use it also as a source for the background music of the film. So, it's an organic process of also, as a filmmaker, learning about the themes that you're working with,
What I'm gleaning from that is also that as a filmmaker, you have to be a very empathetic person, and you have to also be someone who is able to draw out stories and have people be comfortable around you and draw stories out from people.
So, sometimes I'm also very conflicted about this research and everything because, very often I hear, like some of my colleagues who are straight and who are approaching queer stories about, oh, we are doing this research to understand, and while all we'll be in a jury where we are discussing short films, and suddenly one of my colleagues will say, oh, a whole new world opened up to me while reading the script, and I'm always thinking that, am I such an alien? How different is my world from your world? You know, and I think that all the films that I did, which are not queer narratives, I didn't need someone, you know, or a research person to help me understand how straight people think or feel, you know. So sometimes I don't know that, and I feel that yes, you know, when you're going into a space that you don't know and you want to learn, you have to also be willing to unlearn, because sometimes you go with certain like, you know, the first initial years that I went to Kashmir, I was always scared about how would I be received as an out and proud gay person in a milieu which is predominantly Muslim. And I realized, like, I also do a lot of filmmaking workshop with students there, and the love I get from everybody, sometimes I think I'm skeptical, and I think that, am I accepted because I'm the other? And I then think that no, it's not that. I am undervaluing their ability to empathize and to be able to overcome certain cultural or religious barriers and look at me as just another person and see that I give them love and respect and they can give it back to me. So it's like a really, it's constantly learning and unlearning also, you know.
I'm also really interested, we can take a little bit of a detour into, you know, why you go to Kashmir. I know you mentioned that you teach filmmaking there. And I also know that you mentioned that, you know, cinema halls have been burned down in Kashmir. So what is it like teaching young people filmmaking in a state where there is no culture of cinema? And what has that experience been like for you?
I remember the first workshop that I did with students there. So basically I do workshops where we teach filmmaking with smartphone, because, you know, you don't have the paraphernalia. And for that, later I'll show you a little bit of one of the short films that I shot with the students, and also one of the feature films that I shot with this phone, which has been, you know, traveling. And after I did that, I realized that why not, instead of, you know, always talking of scale, that Kashmir has so many stories that, you know, and Kashmiris need to tell that story, and not just me, you know, they need to tell their own stories. And I thought that the best way would be that there are so many students who are interested, but they don't have the means to come to Mumbai, because it's an expensive city, the entire process is difficult, and they're also scared to step out of the comfort zone. And I thought, okay, let me go there, and I work with students, and not just theoretical. So what we do is, for a couple of months online, work on the script. Then I go there and we have a camp kind of a thing where everyone comes together, 12 students, and we make 4 groups. And we finalize the script, go for recce, shoot the films, edit the films, and have a rough cut ready where we all watch it together and, you know, kind of discuss the films. And that way I feel they go through the entire process. And one of the first films that, you know, one of the first workshop that I did, I wanted them to do a documentary on the burned cinema halls. And then they were also interviewing each other about, do you think there should be cinema halls? Right now there's one cinema hall in Srinagar, but till 2 years ago there were no cinema halls. And one of the students said that no, we should not have cinema halls, it's against our culture. And then this whole discussion started, then why are you doing this workshop? And is it against religion to watch it on big screen, but it's okay to watch it on your mobile or on television, because everyone is watching it? And it started, and the students were discussing, you know, I just started it and then I let them discuss. And it was quite a heated discussion about religion, culture, and, you know. And then the next morning, this student comes up to me and, sir, I was thinking all night about it, and please delete that interview. I think when I make my film, I want my family to watch it on a big screen. And I feel very often that when you're working in this workshop, the idea is not just tell stories, but also true. I'll give you one more example. Sorry if I'm talking too much. Yeah. So when I was doing the second workshop, in the first workshop, there was 11 boys and one girl. And her name was Pakiza, which is the name of a very famous Indian film with this very beautiful actress. And post the workshop, she comes to me and says, sir, I really want to be an actress. And it is kind of, everyone is against it, kind of. And then in the milieu she comes from. So she invited me to a house for lunch, and I go there. And two of her brothers come, and her mother comes and tells that, oh, this is a dream, and we are there to support her, and we really want you to support. And then the two sisters come, who are married, and immediately a big fight starts in the house. And the sisters are, we are going to disown you if you act. You know, what will our in-laws say, da 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 da. And it was a fight, and I was like, okay, I think I just should get out of here. I can't have lunch here. And as I was leaving, the mother comes to me and tells me that, you know, the sisters are married and they have their life. I want her to have a life, you know. And it kind of touched me, it remained with me. So when I came for this workshop, there was this one short film where it was fiction that we were doing this time, and I needed to cast a girl. So I called her up, and her mother said, yeah, you know, she would. And she was about 8 hours away. So she's like, but how will she come? You know, and the whole workshop was in a way where there were no parents or whatever. And this time I had 5 girls and 7 boys. So I was really happy that more and more girls were coming for this workshop. And I said, okay, I'll send my driver. She'll be safe, and let her come. So she comes. We start the workshop, and she's like so happy. Night, we get a call starts with her sisters about, again, blackmailing her. And then tells her, your father will have a heart attack and you'll be responsible. And she was just like 19, and she was crying, and she came to me, said, so what do I do? So I said, you know, it's too much for me to take up this responsibility, and I can't tell you that, you know, it has to be your decision. I'm there to support you, but I can't tell you do it, you know. And she's like, but I don't want to go back. So I said, okay, why don't you work as a part of the crew and stay back? And she said, okay. She was kind of little less unhappy, but of course it was not easy. Next day when we go for the workshop meeting, so there were 5 girls, and one of them used to come in a hijab. So she says that, oh, you know, it's not good for us here that girls will act in Bollywood films. So I said, one is, why are you judging Bollywood actresses? Because everything is not about certain kind of, there are all kinds of roles, and even whatever someone does, why are you judging anybody? I said, I personally might not like or, you know, agree to the concept of hijab, but I respect your choice. If it's a choice, you know, it's for you to decide what you want to. But I said that you are judging this girl who wants to be an actress. I said, but how does it work? Because then according to your culture, I'm a sinner. I'm a gay person. So how is it okay for you to come and learn from me, you know, and learn about filmmaking from me? And there was this silence in the entire class. And it was interesting how over the next few days, you know, the third day, again, it was not something that it was. Then you realize that in society there are so many these barriers that society creates. Third day in the evening, like we had this bonfire, and every night all of us would sit and sing and, you know, do stuff. And she comes suddenly without her hijab, and she looks at me and smiles. And I called her and I said that, listen, I would love you as much with your hijab. If you're doing this for yourself, don't do it for me. And she's like, no, sir, I just feel like with all the other girls, but we all want to dance today, and can you just tell that no one should make videos? Because if some of the boys or anyone puts out a video of them dancing, they will face, and then you realize it's such a small thing. But within that group, through discussions, I think, people start thinking. And I feel filmmaking is not just what you put out, but what happens behind and how, you can.
Absolutely. I mean, it's facilitating space for people to be themselves, not just people who are watching your films, but the people who you're interacting with on set as well. I was thinking about, you're talking about students, but I imagine you have crew as well who have all kinds of problems with who might come to you, and as a director, you are the de facto leader on the set, and that includes, I'm sure, a lot of emotional labor that goes into that job. So that's really incredible and interesting insight.
Like all kinds of, there are people who, like I was doing this film, I Am, and one of the stories was about child sexual abuse. And I remember, like, while working on it, there were crew members who have never ever spoken about, people don't speak about. But this was a crowd-funded film, but for me, the most, the reason I thought that, okay, I will be able to make the film is when I put out on Facebook that I want to do this film, the first check that came to me is 5,000 rupees. So that would be how much dollars? $50, right? Yeah. About $50. Yeah. And saying that I'm a student and I was sexually abused and I want this film to happen. And but I knew when I got that $50, I told my assistants, let's start working towards making this film. And when I was making this film, the number of men and women, and more men, because men usually don't get to talk about, they find it more difficult because of, I'm the macho, whatever, image to talk about their sexual assault. But the number of people who would come to my office and start talking before giving a check and crying, and it was not easy because I'm also not a counselor, I'm not really trained, But then I realized that they were not looking for answers, they were just looking for a space where someone could talk to them, And through that, again, two of the persons who came to talk to me became source of inspiration to try and, to put elements from their life into the film.
That's really incredible to hear about your journey with all these different projects, and I think traveling with the film is such a blessing as well, to see all the reactions that your work is getting. I'd like to shift gears a little bit. I know that there are some students over here, and I'd like to go back to your time as a student and talk more about...
Oh God, that's like decades ago.
And just talk more about, what were, I read that you studied comparative literature, and what were the classes, or what were the moments that you reflect on now that made you the filmmaker that you are today?
I think one of the moments I really, really cherished, that when I was studying comparative literature in Jadavpur University in Calcutta, it was a milieu which believed in comparative arts. So you were reading, you were watching cinema, music, painting, and one of the guests that we had in our university was Hanif Qureshi, who got My Beautiful Laundry. And for me, when I saw that film, for the first time in my life, I felt that, okay, this is me. This is my story, because before that, we didn't exist in any of the conversations that were there. And that was a point where I also started thinking that, okay, this is what since class 8, I wanted to be a filmmaker, but this was more conscious. And the university had this film club, and I became an active member of that, and we used to go to the archive, and every week, whatever filmmaker I want to watch, I used to program, okay, this week we will see Tarkovsky, this week we'll see Godard, and this, so different weeks we would just select the kind of, and I think that was incredible to be exposed to cinema from all over the world, and including Indian cinema. You kind of, your world opens up about, and then having discussion for hours and hours, and that was really nice.
I also watched My Beautiful Laundrette in college, and if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. And I'd love to open it up to Q&A soon. I have one more question, and that's about creative collaboration, and then also the flip side of it, creative friction. And I saw that you often work with your sister, the great editor, Highland Malik, and you've also co-written films with her, and I know that you also co-wrote Wiyafa Himan Karun with Fawzia Malik, who is an incredible writer-director in her own right. So what is the process of creative collaboration like for you? And then have there been moments where there has been creative friction or conflict that you had to navigate?
So I trained as an editor, and when I became my first film was written by me, edited by, because I didn't have the money also to hire an editor. So I was multitasking, working as an art director in different aspects of filmmaking, which before I became a film director, I worked in different aspects. I worked as a film writer, art director, music producer. So I've done all that, and the idea was to be more empowered to make independent cinema, to be able to supervise as much possible. But when I started editing my own film, I realized, and I was very conscious that it's too close to me. I need to distance myself. So at that point, I started collaborating with a director, editor from Berlin called Mela Kruger. She's also a writer. And I thought that it would be nice to collaborate with someone who comes from a totally different culture, and how she looks at the story, and at the same time who knows about it. It's not that she knows nothing about Indian culture, but to distance myself. And I think it always helped, because sometimes you're in too much love with what you do, and I think it's a learning process to let go, and I have learned that. And like for example, now when I was working with Fawzia, the idea of working with Fawzia Mirza as a co-writer for We Are Stories is, I wanted, because the second story is a lesbian love story, and so I wanted to collaborate with someone with a feminine, she's also queer, but she's a woman, and her, experience and the way she looks at, I wanted to see how close, or how, and learn myself from. And I think it was really fascinating working with her. She is Muslim, I'm an atheist, but Hindu, atheist, whatever, So it was interesting, because telling a story which is set in a space that's Muslim, and she's from Pakistan, and this is in the border. So I think it was really important for me to have someone, because I didn't want to go into the narrative of hate, and the othering. So for me, when Fawzia being a part of the process made it easier, made me also look at things again in a more authentic way.
Yeah.
I actually what was interesting is I was screening my last film, Pine Cone, in Chicago, and it's a film about queer desire. And there was someone from Pakistan, and he says, "But how do we deal with it? It's a sin, da da da." And before I could reply, there was this lady there, and she says, "Oh, I'm Fawzia's ex-girlfriend, and I'm Muslim, and I'm from Pakistan, and I'm a practicing Muslim, and I'm lesbian. And if you want to look for hate in the Quran, you'll find that. And if you want to look for love, you'll find that. It's what you look for." And for me, that was such an inspiring thing to hear. And I thought I'll use that for my film.
That's an incredible story. And I actually was very curious about Pine Cone, and you also wrote an autobiography, I Am Onir, and then Pine Cone seems to be a deeply personal work about love. And what was it like? Was it connected, the process of writing about your life and then making something that feels deeply personal and I was just very curious about.
So I was working on my biography, and that's when We Are Fireman Karun got banned by the Ministry of Defense. And I was so upset that I said that I need to keep telling our stories. And then I just suddenly felt that, okay, I'll take my phone and I'll shoot a film. And I thought that why not tell a film which is, because in India we don't have films that talk about queer desire. And I thought, let me, make a film which is about queer desire. Again, because it was from my biography, I then started working with, after I wrote the first draft, I started working with Ashwini Malik, another writer, so that I could distance myself. And he changed quite a few things, so that it's...
Yeah. And my final question before we open it up is, what does an Onir film set feel like?
I hope it feels like home for my crew, that's all.
And I know that people wear many different hats on your set, and I think that is really true to the spirit of indie filmmaking. I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that and how you developed that.
I feel because when I started the first film that I worked on in 2000, was when I was an editor, and my director comes to me and says that you have a good sense of music, will you come and direct the songs, because my choreographer thing is not working out. Until then, I'd never been to a film set, and I'm like, God, this is an opportunity. And I said yes, and I went to the set, and it had a very big Bollywood star. And the first few days was very difficult because she thought, who is this guy who is directing the songs? And in Bollywood, when you do the songs, it's usually they go like 1, 2, 3, 4, da da. And I didn't know all that. I was just like, okay, roll sound, roll music, camera. And she was like, getting irritated. And then I told the director that I'll explain the shots to you, you direct. But she was not being able to do the music thing. So I think she had some conversation with the actress, and she suddenly, after the third day shoot, she tells me that, why don't you come and have dinner with me? And I was like, what happened to her? Suddenly she's being so friendly. And then she says, oh, you're one of the few people here in the set that I can talk to. So what I used to do is, every day before anyone got to the set, I used to go and check the costumes, check the art. It was not my job. I used to just do it because it just fascinated me to be there, and I was learning. And I ended up doing much more things than most of the associate director was. So I told her that, she's like, oh, I can talk to you, da da da. And I said, listen, if you tell me that you feel that I'm a friend, I'll treat you as one. If you want to be treated as a star, I can't, So but then we really became good friends. And to an extent that after a point, my director, she was someone who would focus on the main stars scenes, and then very often want to go and do something else when the other scenes. So she started, instead of telling her associate, she would tell me that, listen, I've got some work, will you direct this scene? And I was like, really happy to be directing those scenes. And later, when the film was getting screened and she would get interviews, very often she would tell that, okay, this is my favorite scene. And the actors knew, and I knew that I had done it. And these actors, Sanjay Suri and Ravina, were instrumental in telling me, because I was working, that, listen, why don't you write your script? And you have ideas and you can direct. Until then, I had no idea how I would become a director. But having gone through a process where working on different aspects of filmmaking was a part of, learning, I thought that it's, with my team also, I let people do as much as they want, because I feel then they feel that, okay, we are learning. And many of my assistants have now become very successful filmmakers, and I'm really happy about that.
That's really wonderful and inspiring. And does anyone in the audience have any questions?
When you're filming these scenes that could be potentially inflammatory where you're filming them. Do you find yourself restricting what you put on the camera to sort of pre-avoid censorship, or sort of like limit? Do you feel limited, like, you know, in what you can actually show?
Can I show one more scene from this film, because that will kind of answer, and then I'll answer. Yeah.
Okay, I see you now.
No, so like there are 3 parts and like 3 lovemaking scenes, and I wanted to show it differently, each one. That is the first time when there's like students, and then progressively I treat the lovemaking scenes differently. But what we did, and that was, we did a lot of workshops with the actors so that they're comfortable. And like the first time, I remember the actor just looked around, like for this scene, that I had all my assistants. There were like, I have like a small crew of 4, so 2 guys, 2 girls, they were all there. And he's like, is everyone going to be here? I'm like, yes, whoever will be there during the shoot will be here, because there's nothing, you know, nothing secret, nothing happening that's supposed to be. And I think by the time we got to the actual shooting, nobody cared, you know. And even the makeup person, who was like, I think for the first time in his life, he was, you know, doing something like this, but he was sitting there looking at the monitor, and he's like, okay, should I go and do a little touch up? And I'm like, no, it's okay. And then he would say that of the 2 boys, that other one is more genuine. And so, you know, I was so happy that he was just looking at it like anything else, and he was not seeing it as something that, you know, was he was scandalized about.
Intimate scenes, and especially like the many Indian film industries or Bollywood, there's just, how do I phrase this? There have been so many applications, it's not usually done right. How do you make I know you briefly spoke about it, but how do you make the actors feel comfortable with each other?
One is like, we were shooting this not in Bombay but in Kochi, so an outdoor location. So I would encourage them to share rooms, you know, just to be talking to each other, chatting with each other, have a certain physical proximity, you know, to be comfortable with each other's presence. And of course, before that, the workshops have happened. I would just tell them that just go for coffee dates or whatever, just get to know each other, to be comfortable with each other. And then also I feel that in the crew, if everyone is just, no one is like talking about, oh my God, how you're going to do this. And we're all talking, okay, this is over, let's go to the next shot, and just focusing on the scene being correct, you know. And also, I think what I was using the song for all the lovemaking for a purpose, is that I feel very often what we see when it comes to queer lovemaking is just lust, you know. And I wanted us to portray, especially in a milieu where you don't get to see queer films, and desire is to show the happiness and joy of lovemaking, you know, than just the lust part of it, you know. And that's what, you know, was the approach for this. And it was very interesting that when I went for the censor certificate, I was scared that and it's sad also ultimately what happened. So you know, in India, so when you go for film certification, there is 5 people you're not allowed to meet, you don't know who they are, and they're sitting inside a room, they watch the film and they call you, almost like, you know, suddenly you feel like you're giving some interview or exam, like back to school. And they look at you, and when I walked in, there were these 5 people, and you know, some of them couldn't even look at me as if I was some dirty thing, you know. And then one person says, oh, you must understand, we are from middle class conservative families. I'm like, okay, so that's not my problem, you know. And then one person says that, you know, now the Supreme Court has allowed sex. so we can't even cut it. So see the importance of the Supreme Court verdict. So he says, so we will not do that. But you have this small scene, there's this section where this guy is buggering an older man. We should reduce that by 3 seconds. So I'm like, what if I increase the blowjob sequence by 3 seconds? And okay. So, and then they come that there is a sequence, and that's, kind of inspired from my life, is the niece calls up the uncle, the main protagonist, and says that, uncle, my mom has told, and she's like a 9-year-old girl, says, mom has told me, and he's like, what? He's like, that you're gay, and I love you. And the censor board said that, why do children need to know the word gay? And you have to delete the word gay. So, and it was, and I kept telling, but this is my life. My niece told me that, and I think it's important that children accept, because, the number of children who are traumatized by friends bullying and other, people die by, suicide, and, it's really traumatic for a lot of queer people, and that we need to introduce. But of course they would not listen, and I thought, okay, I'll get into more problem if I just fight about this. So I said, what if I keep it that uncle, mom has told me, silence, and I love you. And this is right at the end of the film, so it's obvious, They said, okay. So, but I was sad that to have to remove the word gay, in 2025.
How do you feel about the nature of queerness always being in some sort of turmoil, some sort of pain, some sort of anguish instead of celebrated or any joy? Like when you think of Vera, when you think of Maurice, when you think of Call Me By Your Name, it's always in these taboo situations or just not in a good place.
Yeah. So actually when I saw All of Us Strangers, I was like, oh my God. Yeah, I was like, it was devastating, and I was like, no. Also, and, so when I was making Pinecone, one of the things I wanted to do is celebrate queer desire. So when I wrote the first draft, it ended up with tragedy, like my life. And then my co-writer is like, no, we can't do this. This has to be a celebration. And that's what we decided, that, okay, these are, it goes through a phase. It starts in 1990 when it was criminalized by law. Goes through the second phase is when the Delhi High Court, one state decriminalized, so there is a slight shift. And the third part is after the Supreme Court decriminalized. So there's a journey, and it ends with hope where they celebrate their love, And for me it was very important. And in the film, actually, there is, apart from the sister and the niece, there is no straight characters. I'm like, okay, I just wanted to be a world of queer characters and see it from that point of view. And I wanted to bring out that I have lived my life, and I don't think I have a tragic life. I have ups and downs, but overall I think I'm a happy person, and that's what I wanted to get in that film. And even while working in FIME and Karuna, I feel that I leave it with a little bit of hope, because I believe in hope. And increasingly the films that I'm working on, even the one that I'm working right now about the blind queer person, they are films about hope, about being survivors without, and not victims. Like even the blind person, nowhere do I don't like to use pity, And I realized at one point when we were shooting that I was at times like shouting, not shouting, but I had forgotten that he's actually blind. I was just treating him like another actor and correcting him where he was making a mistake, and I think that he felt that, and he opened up more because he felt that he was not being treated as someone special.
Yeah, just one more question. When you're like editing and you're in the editing process, is there any film that comes to mind? Like, is there like any director that comes to mind or you're inspired by?
There are too many directors. When I think of my journey becoming a director and later, I'm constantly inspired by so many filmmakers. There's so many beautiful films. There's not one, but one of the filmmakers, queer filmmakers who I just adore is Pedro Almodovar. And I just think and I don't think that my style is anywhere close to him, but he just is inspiring. He's just, so I don't think that when I shoot, very often people want like your DOP or whatever, do you have some reference? And I've never had a reference. For me, it has to come from the space that one shoots in, and I would like to believe that slowly over the last 20 years that I've been directing films that I have developed a language of my own, however tiny it might be. But I think there's just too many beautiful filmmakers who are inspiring. And when I'm editing, like I mentioned before, I am an editor when I'm shooting also, because I'm doing independent films, I have to very often shoot. Like I shot the Kashmir film in 17 days. I shot Pine Cone in 15 days because I'm editing while I'm shooting, which is not always the best thing because sometimes you want to have options. But as an independent filmmaker, having to make my films within a certain budget, I feel it's very important that in the set, I'm not trying to figure out what shot to take, master shot, and then this. I just shoot a little bit extra, but more or less what I need. And then I also at the same time realize that when you are editing, you can juggle around scenes. And again, always, like right now, I'm just finished the first cut of this other short film, and first thing I'm doing is subtitling it, sending it to my co-editor in Berlin. She has a look, want to know the perspective. So constantly just also a process of distancing, though it's still as much mine.
What part of the process does that start in? Is it when you're already, you've decided to make a film at a certain point? Do you start thinking about, how am I going to finance it? Do you apply for grants, or can you talk a little bit about the financing process?
So in India, actually, for the kind of films I do, there's no possibility of grants, and especially with the current right-wing government, it's impossible. For me, because of having made independent films, mostly I always look for people who believe in things that I believe and are willing to come together on the journey. Like I mentioned, crowdfunding. Pine Cone, I just found one partner who got excited that I'm shooting the film on an iPhone and let's experiment, and became partners. With my Kashmir film, it was accidental that my life insurance had just matured because all studios, everyone backed out the minute the government banned it. And I decided to just put in all my savings and make the film. So for me, it changes. And very often today in discussions worldwide about independent cinema, there are people talking about how important it is for a filmmaker to think about the marketing and distribution when one is scripting and planning. And I think that is such crap, because my job as a filmmaker is I'm not supposed to know about marketing and distribution. It's someone else's job. And just to put the entire burden on us is so unfair. You not only tell your stories, then you have to figure out how to, it is someone else's. Like I always tell with studios and all, they'll say, oh, it's going to be difficult to market. And I'm like, if my film costs $100, okay, and you say that it's difficult to market, whereas you'll be making something for $10,000 which is shit, and you don't have to, because it has the stars, you anyway don't have to think. That means you don't know your job, because to market that is no rocket science, and even there you fail because the story does not have substance, you know. And if you can't sell something for which is $10, then the problem is with you, because we all know that there is an audience. It is how you reach to them, you know. And I feel that putting that burden, and of course we end up having to do all that all the time, but it's not fair and it's not my job, you know. And I feel that as a creator, my focus should have been just being able to make my films, but unfortunately you have to multitask producing, and I very often tell my friends that, listen, at the set, you handle the money. I don't want to be dealing with everyday bills, and you know, so my associate takes over as the producer, and you know, he starts doing that, and it's sometimes not easy, but then again, if you want to do something, you just do it.
But I mean, even beyond money and marketing, your movies are not just a product, right? These are tools by which many lives can change, right? So if your movie reaches to a certain section of people that can change their lives, so how do you see as a creator that if your work is not reaching to them, you would be bad, right? I mean, not even personally, from a social perspective.
No, I feel that at the end of it, when you're living in a certain milieu, you cannot expect change to happen overnight. And I feel that, you know, when I made My Brother Nikhil in 2005, and 20 years later, when I know that it's still online on Prime Video, because now the different modes it's existing, it's in libraries across the world where students access it, study it, talk about it. And the number of people who still come up to me from the community saying, I used the film to come out to my family. This was the first time, like a lot of Indians have, you know, South Asians, not just Indians, have come up to me and told me that till I watched this film, I didn't have any reference point of view from my own country. And for me, it's not about, then I would be chasing the box office. I've never been chasing. And I hope I try to make films that are not only about Friday box office and a few, and they're beyond that, and they stay, and very often it's very vain maybe, but I put that it's sculpting in time. One of my favorite phrases from Tarkovsky, and I try and do, I hope that when I make films they stay back, and there are films that are not bound by time, and they reflect upon a certain time that people need to remind themselves that, okay, you know, today even if you look what is happening here, you know, that there's a backlash against queer rights, and then you realize that you have to be constantly vigilant and constantly tell yourself never forget, you know. And for never forget, you need to know the history, to cherish the freedom that we have. I keep telling a lot of young people who, you know, by the time they became teenagers, it was post 2018 when it was decriminalized. But to cherish what one has to know that the fight that has gone to get what. And I feel that in a way, some of my work is a testimony, it remains as a testimony to that, as a diary to that.
Thank you. When you were talking about shooting this scene on an iPhone or on a cell phone more generally, I was thinking about the Dogma 95 movement in Denmark, associated with filmmakers like Lars von Trier. And I think they have this idea that imposing constraints upon yourself can enhance creativity. So I was wondering if you could talk about the ways in which shooting on a phone maybe enhanced creativity, or maybe sometimes it got in the way of creativity. What was that like?
So for me, when I was writing the script, I knew I'm going to shoot it with an iPhone, and I was aware of what are the positives and what are the negatives. For example, for me, I think what was really easy was when I was shooting the intimate scenes, we just didn't have any paraphernalia. There were the actors and there was like 4 of us with the camera, and it was easy to navigate. We didn't even do lighting. I didn't have the money, so sometimes it's a little grainy. But having said that, I think also what happened is we shot in a lot of public places where I didn't have the permission, because the permission would cost a lot of money, including shooting on this new bridge in Bombay, it's impossible to get the permission to shoot there. But because I was shooting with an iPhone, these days, when you're in a public space with an iPhone, people think someone must be making a real video or some shit, So no one cared what we were doing, And so I was happily shooting everywhere in public places. The only time I had a little bit of a problem is in Mumbai. There's this place called Marine Drive, and I needed to shoot it at night. And I didn't know that they have this, the Mumbai police has this, they're fascinated they're obsessed with the idea of chasing couples after 11 in the night. So they're all there looking around. So we would be standing I would send 2 assistants to one corner, one here, looking out for when there's a police, and whenever these 2 guys, actors, would go ahead and we'd start shooting, and then someone would say, come, we'd all run and hide ourselves, So it would it was funny that, we were actually running and hiding constantly. And, but yeah, it's also fun to be, and we could do all that. So I feel that also now, I think there's so much more possibilities with iPhones. You have lenses coming. I didn't have anything. I just had this phone, and you have your what is it called? That Steadicam kind of thing. GoPro, no? Yeah, no, not GoPro. Sorry, I forgot the name. Yeah, gimbal. Sorry, with which you can get certain movements and all that. So there are much more possibilities. But the most important thing is, I think, to remember that it's the story. And then you can use that for, even the student films that I shot, which was a lot of landscape, and I realized, and that's not even with iPhones, because students in Kashmir didn't have, iPhones are more expensive, and I'll show you maybe 1 minute of that. And I was so happy that when the film started going to different film festivals, and it's just like, my students' first films shot on iPhones, and I think there's so much possibilities today with that you can do. I'll just show a little bit. Yeah, so this was a shot by, and also again in terms of subjects, we keep trying to encourage the students to think. So this film was about the one that I mentioned before, where there was this girl who wanted to act. So it's a love story between, which people don't talk about. There is this caste system in the Muslim community, so they belong to 2 different castes of the Muslim community. So it's a love story between this guy and he's come back to the village after a long time, where there was this girl who he was in love with, that little girl who grew up, kind of. But yeah, this was shot with a smartphone, and then, in that workshop, 12-day workshop that we did, where we shot, edited, and later did the post, of course.
So my question is about your experience in casting and auditioning for these roles. As your journey as a filmmaker, are you seeing a lot more artists who are heterosexual applying and wanting to play these roles, or how has the experience been?
So when I was doing Pinecone, which is not too long back, there would be actors who have auditioned, and they would say that, if it was a girl, we could do the kissing. And I'm like, you're not supposed to be enjoying, it's just a role, And then there was this guy who was finalized, and 2 weeks before the shooting, he says, my mother said she'll commit suicide if I do the film. No, literally, and backed out. So I feel that still the fear, and it's not just about heterosexuals, I think a lot of closeted people also are afraid of what people will think if I kiss another guy, and that fear of, it's not just the actors, it's the audience. In India, I feel a lot of straight people, even here I'm sure, with especially the South Asian community, that they're afraid to come and watch a film which is quote unquote queer cinema, because they're like, okay, it's their cinema, so what if I go and watch, and if it's a guy, especially men, I feel are more threatened, that if they go and watch and enjoy a gay film or queer narrative, then what will people perceive them as? And I feel that really makes it difficult, and it's not easy even now, especially, and some actors who have done roles where there's a little bit intimacy, they think that, oh, now they should get all the, it's almost like, okay, one tick mark done, I've done one gay, and if you approach them, what really puts me off is when people tell that, oh, I've done one gay role. I'm like, how many straight roles have you done? What is gay role? All our lives, all our stories is not one story. How do you even say something like that? So it is because of the stigma, and some people want to do it because they'll get some Filmfare award or some award, just because of that one tick mark they need, and they'll have a sanitized kiss there, and that's it. And very often they will say that, oh, why do we need to show more? But because it's seen from a very heteronormative gaze, it's a sense of, like, there was a journalist, when I was screening Pinecone in Calcutta, and she said that, I love the film, but don't you think there is too much of sex? So I said, you saw a 90-minute film, and if I calculate all the making, it'll be about maybe 5 minutes. And you go and watch so many films that's coming out where there will be hours of violence, rape, murder, killing. You're okay watching that, but you cannot watch 5 minutes of two people making love, which is beautiful. But you'll watch violence, you'll watch killing, so the problem lies with you, not with the film.
And just to add to that, I mean, how normal, I remember when I was a teenager watching this one Hindi movie that was an independent film, and I won't name the film and the filmmaker who made it, but I remember there was a very brutal killing of a woman in that film, and there was a tracking shot of like her body and her dead body, and like it was like kind of like a sexy tracking shot of her dead body, like the reveal that she's dead. And I remember just being so disturbed, and the fact that is so normalized. She was, kind of in her undergarments when she was found, and the way that it was revealed was just like there was that lusty kind of gaze, and it's a very celebrated filmmaker who directed that film. But yeah, I doubt he had any issues with the censor board with that one.
No, I feel like it always surprises me, like, as I was telling you earlier, that you'll have all these policemen with their lathis chasing couples, and no one has a problem that people are shitting in the public. I'm like, there's something seriously wrong with us, that we normalize people abusing, screaming at each other, shitting in public, peeing in public, everything. But, oh, love, no.
I mean, have you done, or are you planning to do any work with for transgenders?
So, We Are is a sequel to, like I mentioned before, I Am, but because of the Defense Ministry banning my film, the studios backed out. So originally it was supposed to be 4 stories like I Am in one film. And that's when I started reworking on the first story as a feature film. And now I've decided to make those 4 stories as 4 features which are interconnected. So if you were there at the screening of We Are. So in that film there is a small scene where the security guys looking in the mobile phone. There's a drag queen who's performing. So the second story is called We Are Mumtaz and Anhad, where Mumtaz is a drag queen, and I'm casting a trans actor playing the role of a trans drag queen, and it's her story. So that's the second, where the third film is a lesbian love story and the fourth one is a bisexual love story.
I have one question regarding your process of developing the script. So your films mostly is a nice blend of realism and poetic introspection, if I use that term. So now as a filmmaker, how you decide when to stop documenting the reality and now start creating art out of it? And if you can give a real example from one of your movies, that would be really great.
Art is reality. So I don't, for me, poetry is as real, and I don't feel like, I mean, there are people like I remember because of also the cliches that we have in terms of mainstream cinema and independent cinema, that when I made my first film, My Brother Nikhil, which is a fiction, inspired by a real story again, and when I was shooting it, I was trying to figure out again, how do I do it, because I had very little finance, and those days it was film, you know, so I had to think of how we don't spend too much money on many cans, you know, expensive. And I thought that, okay, let me adapt the format of docu-fiction where there are characters speaking to the camera about someone who is dead, and then you go to the scenes and all that. And after we finished the film, when we were trying to look for distributors, I had gone to a very reputed distribution company. It was called UTV at that point. And there were like 10 people sitting, and I was playing the film. So there were people on the mobile, and, you know, all kinds of things were happening. And then one person said that, so you are showing us the rushes. And I was like, God, this guy is supposed to judge and doesn't know the difference. Another person says that, you know, so this is a documentary film. And at that point, I stopped screening it, and I said that since you all don't know the difference between a documentary and a fiction and rushes, I will not show the film to you or want you to distribute the film. And very often now also there are people who will message me that, oh, I've seen your documentaries, you know, just because they feel they're more realistic, you know. So I feel that I don't really, I just try to keep it real. And I feel that I'm not making any conscious effort to make it poetic or artistic, or I mean, I think it's just me, the way I see reality, the way I look at reality, the kind of films that appeal to me, and that's what, it's more organic than conscious thinking.
I have one question on the subject of constraints in filmmaking. AI is often talked about a way that may be helpful to filmmakers, the independent filmmakers, at least in an optimistic way. It's pitched in that way, and we briefly touched upon AI yesterday, and we spoke about it. But I'd love to just talk about the discourse around AI and how it's impacting film industries and how you feel about it as an indie filmmaker.
Like recently in India, there was a lot of controversy. There was this film which was a very successful film, and then the producers just decided to use AI without the permission of the director, change the end and re-release it, Rajna. Okay. And I find it alarming that, you know, why do we want to be replaced as someone who can think and design? Not something, you don't have to be, I don't believe in this concept of perfect. I think imperfection is beautiful. It's okay when I look at my work and I think that, this is, you know, it's okay. It's me. And I don't want AI to be taking over the voice, imperfect voice that I have, and because ultimately it leads towards a space where I won't be needed. So as filmmakers, why are we trying to empower something that is ultimately trying to replace us as creators?
Yeah, we're training
you know, and I feel that somewhere humans, like even when, like I was talking about it, when nuclear energy initially came in, it could have been used for the best things, but we misuse it more for the worst possible things. And I think AI can be used for some really important things, beautiful things, but to be used for throwing people out of their jobs, which is happening. There are people creating ads without actors, without sets, so you're constantly disempowering people. And also I feel very often that it also makes you so dependent on something else to decide, that you stop using your own faculties to, like, I'll give you a small example, that every time I put an Instagram post, within 5 minutes, my niece or my sister will message me that your spelling is wrong, you're grammatically, you've made this mistake. And I was like, okay, shit, I have to make those corrections. Whereas I suddenly see some of my artists or whatever putting posts where it sounds so profound, and like, and then you meet them and they can't speak that language. And I'm like, why would you want someone to like a you that's not you?
It's like catfishing on another level.
Yeah, and that also slowly you're getting used to the idea that someone else writes for you, thinks for you. You put in that, oh my God, it's so exciting. You just put the idea, the script comes out. No, I want to think it. I want my brain to be constantly active and create, and then not just be some passive thing which is, oh, I have this idea, let's put it there, and a script comes out.
Well, I guess this is a two-part question. One about AI and the other part just in general. Sam Altman, the guy had OpenAI, was made a comment about everyone being the main character and that being the goal of that being the goal of AI long term. How do you feel about statements like that? And then when you hear stuff like that, how do you feel about these very sensitive groups queer people throughout the world and diverse groups of the world, and how they have never been the main character, and there's literally no way for them to be the main character even under these AI oppression spaces, and then the centers where AI are, the power centers where AI are, and the data centers where AI are just literally poisoning the land of the region. How do you
Yeah, also in terms of energy, everything. It's and I just don't understand that, today only I was in the morning reading about and in India every third day you read it about landslides and floods and 30 people missing, 20 dead, just numbers. And we just don't stop. We are just, and AI is another form of that, this now suddenly, especially in the US, leading it, and what it does starts affecting other countries is, it's climate change is fiction, and you don't need to talk about it, while glaciers are melting, and AI needs so much more energy than anything else, and we just just because some people will profit out of it, and they don't care if so many people are falling into the space. Yeah.
But do you think that through AI, and I know the answer is obviously not yes, but how is the main character of it all when you're making films and stuff like that?
I don't know. I'm so scared that every day, because again it's algorithm. I'll keep getting emails and messages that if you're above 50, you need to learn this of AI, and I'm like, okay, I'm 56, so it's aimed at me, but I don't want to. I don't want to be told that I need to know it to survive in this world, and that's what's scary. That why do I have to, as a filmmaker, I should be the one who chooses, right? I should be the one who decides how I use my phone, instead of the phone and social media deciding and shaping up my life and how I spend my time. So I want to at least believe that I'm in control of my life and my art, and that is what scares me about. And I will also admit that I don't really know everything about what are the possibilities, but I feel it's okay if I don't want to know. There are so many things that I don't know, and this is something I just don't trust, and I feel that I'm fine without it. I hope I answered your question. It's difficult.
There's a book called Empire of AI that's written by a journalist named Karen Howe. She used to work for the MIT Tech Review, Wired, and she actually spent a couple of years at OpenAI actually documenting what was happening there. So it's really, really informative about, not to use big words, but I think this is warranted, the propaganda that's causing AI to be everywhere right now. I work in tech, and I know not just my company, but many companies have AI goals for us to put as part of our performance, which really gives me the heebie-jeebies, because I don't want to use AI in the way that you're asking me to. I work in tech, so I'm not opposed to the good use cases of AI, because there are ways we can, improve diversity and representation with AI. But what's happening right now, I would recommend that book to everybody, because it gets into why we're being fed this narrative and what's behind it, and all the calculations, and how OpenAI actually started with a very philanthropic, good mission. Actually, they wanted it to not be used the way it is, and then along the way, things change because of money. So I'll leave you with that.
No AI can match up with what we think as artists. I believe that, and I feel that an audience also will know the difference. Yeah, till they become, and I hope they don't become. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good note to end.
We can take this outside. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.